favorite Draftkings slates of the year every single year. I'm really ready to get into all of that. Before I do, if you're new here, make sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, turn on the notification bell. It all really helps me grow, and it takes like 5 seconds of your time. And it's free to use. So just please help me out with that. Give me that like and that subscribe. Trying to hit 400 by the end of the month, and we're almost at the end of the month, and we're almost there. So let's continue to keep growing. If you want to get more of my content, you can always subscribe to my Patreon. I'll put a link in my bio below. But that's all I really got to say. Let's get into the players, because I know that's what everyone wants to hear about for Thanksgiving Day football. We're going to start with the quarterbacks. We're going to start with Lamar Jackson. So we have 3 games on this slate. We have the Baltimore Ravens and Pittsburgh Steelers, the Houston Texans and the Detroit Lions, and then the Washington football team and the Dallas Cowboys. So only one real life good game, but it's probably not going to be the game I want to target on DraftKings as much. So when we look at the totals, we see the line on the Pittsburgh-Baltimore game is the lowest right now at 45.5. But then you have the Dallas and the Washington game is at 46. But the Detroit and Houston game is a 51.5 game total. Clearly farther ahead than the rest of them. It's more than likely going to be the highest scoring game. So I'm definitely going to want to attack that game, especially from a stack perspective. Like if I'm making game stacks, those are the 2 teams I want to go with, Detroit and Houston. If you look at Deshaun Watson and Matthew Stafford going up against the 14th and 15th best defenses for opposing quarterbacks to attack, that's going to be a spot you want to go to. Alex Smith is in a good spot as well against Dallas. They've allowed 10th most points to opposing quarterbacks. I think that's a stack that you could definitely be interested to get some. And I also think that Pittsburgh's Ben Roethlisberger is one that you could look towards as well. It's going to be lower owned. And, against Baltimore, is perceived as a really tough defense, hasn't been as good as people think. Allowing 19th most points to opposing quarterbacks. I'm definitely going to stay away from Lamar stacks. They've allowed, the Pittsburgh defense has just been really good, and Lamar hasn't been fantastic recently, so I don't think that's a spot that I really would want to get to immediately for sure. So I'm not as interested in Lamar, and Andy Dalton I'm just not either. Washington's defense isn't horrible, but it's not great either, and we just haven't seen anything from him to really want me to go there. But Matthew Stafford and Deshaun Watson are definitely my favorite stack options, and you'll know more about them when we start talking about the receivers, but everything just looks good. The matchup looks fantastic. It should be a close game. Total, I think, is a 2-point spread right now in the game, so that last thing I looked at was 2-point spread, so it's going to be a close game, close high-scoring game, 2 bad defenses, and 2 pretty solid offenses. So those are definitely going to be the stacks I want to go to. We'll go over to the running backs now. Where the first one I'm going to talk about is Gus Edwards. So Gus Edwards is going to be the starting back in Baltimore. J.K. Dobbins and Mark Ingram both got put on the COVID list yesterday, so neither of them are going to play. So Gus Edwards is going to lead this backfield, and he should see probably 15 to 20 touches. I don't think Justice Hill is going to get a ton of run. He may get a few carries there, but I don't think it's going to be that much of a split backfield because when Dobbins and Edwards were running without Ingram, they didn't even involve Justice Hill. So I don't think he's going to get too much usage. When we go look at the matchup, it is going to be a tough matchup against Pittsburgh for Gus Edwards. They are not favored in a game against a really tough running defense. He does have 11 red zone carries on the year and 6 inside the 5 carries. When you go look at overall usage, he's averaging 9 carries per game. But in the weeks when we didn't have Mark Ingram, which are right here, we saw him get more usage. And now there's no Mark Ingram or J.K. Dobbins, so I expect Gus Edwards to get all the usage. He's not going to get a ton of usage in the passing game, but that's okay. He is the flat minimum on DraftKings for a running back. He's $4,000. It's going to give you so much value. That's going to be a thing that's key on this slate. There's a ton of value just pretty much everywhere. But Gus Edwards looks like a pretty solid one. It is a tough matchup. He's probably going to be really popular. There are definitely ways to get off of him, but I do think he's still fine. James Conner is the next running back I want to look towards. We don't have a ton of we have 2 bell cow backs in this game or on this day. Gus Edwards actually could become one, but for sure James Conner is going to be the bell cow on this team. Baltimore's been a kind of tough, rough defense. They've allowed 23rd most points to opposing running backs so far this year. But when you go look at the usage, he does have 26 red zone carries and 9 inside the 5 carries. He's 1 less red zone carry on the year than Zeke. Not as many inside the 5. Benny Snell's been getting those, but it's not like there's a ton of those every single game. When you go look at the usage, James Conner's averaging 15.44 running or rushes per game and 3 targets per game to 18.44 touches per game. So second most touches on average is for James Conner. So he's going to be going against a tough defense, but I don't really mind it. I think James Conner's still a fine play. Duke Johnson is another pretty cheap option, like $5,900 going against the Houston Texans. Ever since David Johnson's been out and Duke Johnson's taken over, he's been pretty bad. He's just been inefficient, not doing much. I mean, only averaging 0.74 points per touch and 3.1 yards per carry is not really great. All the running backs averaging the least amount of yards per carry. But Duke Johnson is getting the usage still. And Detroit's a horrible run defense. In the 3 games without David Johnson, he's averaging 13.33 carries per game and 3.33 targets per game, getting to 16.66 touches per game, which is the 3rd most on the entire slate this week. So Duke Johnson's getting the usage. If they're going to be playing from ahead, he's going to get even more of it. And Detroit's allowed the most points to running back so far this year. They've been a horrible run defense. He's not that expensive, so I think Duke Johnson's a pretty good play. He's also probably going to be pretty popular. Pretty much everyone in this game is going to be really popular, but I do think he's a good spot. Ezekiel Elliott pretty much just feels like the running back to play this week. He's not ridiculously expensive, so you don't have to worry about paying an absolute premium for him. They are favored against Washington, who has the 22nd best run defense in the league, but 2 weeks ago they played Detroit and DeAndre Swift just torched them. I don't think their run defense is that good. I'm not really worried about it at all, and he's going to get all the usage. I mean, he has 27 red zone carries and 16 inside of 5 carries on the year, leads the league in inside of 5 carries. When you look at overall usage, he's averaging 17.1 carries per game and 22.2 touches per game overall. But some of these games, here, the 12, 19, 18, or really just those 12s, those are games that were getting blown out, and he's not obviously just not going to get as much usage in the running game when they're getting blown out, because that's just how football works. But this is a game where they are favored, and I mean, even if they don't win, which it's definitely not a guarantee Dallas wins this game. Both these teams suck, so. But they're not going to get blown out. I don't think anyone expects that to happen. So Ezekiel Elliott, just feels like a pretty safe play to me. If I'm playing cash games, I think that's probably the first guy I just put in the cash. So definitely like him everywhere. I'm probably going to have a lot of Zeke. It's pretty easy to fit in lineups. You don't need to spend, it's just, there's not you're not worrying really too much about salary on the slate. It's not it's a hard salary slate at all. So Zeke is definitely worth paying up for, in my opinion. I think he's a good option. Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissic are the 2 Washington football team running backs. They've been doing pretty productive recently. The Cowboys allowed the 10th most points to opposing running backs this year, so it is a pretty solid matchup for them. When you look at overall usage, Gibson does have 9 inside of 5 carries and 19 red zone carries. McKissic only 9 red zone carries and 2 inside of 5 carries. But McKissic is more used in the passing game, as we all know. When you look at overall usage, Antonio Gibson averaging 11.9 rushes per game, and McKissic's averaging 5.1. But in passing game, McKissic's averaging 6.6 targets per game, and Gibson's only averaging 3.2. Gibson's still averaging 15.1 touches per game. McKissic averaging 11.7. They're both cheap enough for me to want to get to them. I definitely prefer Gibson because he does have the more high upside usage, but McKissic probably has a better floor for the passing game. But Gibson getting all those inside of 5 carries and red zone carries definitely makes me like him a little bit more. But I'm definitely going to be interested in both these guys. Going to have a lot of them in tournaments. I usually don't suggest playing 2 running backs together, but on a slate like this, it could be a definitely contrarian option to go there. I probably still won't because that just usually doesn't work out, but definitely going to be a little more contrarian, especially when one of the running backs is really just a receiver. It's not the worst idea in the world. Detroit's going to be the backfield we got to pay attention to on Thanksgiving Day, honestly. Maybe we'll know, I guess, today or tomorrow if DeAndre Swift's going to play. But DeAndre Swift missed last week with a concussion, and he could miss again this week. I don't know why the carry on Johnson thing doesn't say 51.5 game total, but it should. DeAndre Swift was out last week with a concussion, and honestly, I don't think he's going to play this week either. I'd be kind of surprised if he does at this point. But if DeAndre Swift does play, he's my favorite play at running back on the slate. Not too expensive, going against Houston, who's allowed the 2nd most points opposing running backs this year. They've been absolutely terrible. And recently, DeAndre Swift picked up the usage. In week 9 and 10, he had 13 and 16 carries, and 5 and 5 targets. He was pretty much getting the bell cow role, averaging 15.93 on the season, but in the past few weeks, it's been more like 18. So, and against Houston, which is a terrible run defense, DeAndre Swift would be my favorite play if he is active on the entire slate, but of course, we got to pay attention if he's going to play or not. If he doesn't, carry on and Adrian Peterson, definitely interesting. Now, neither of these guys got a ton of usage last week. Kerryon Johnson had 11 touches and Adrian Peterson had 8, but Detroit didn't even score last week, so they were playing from behind the entire game, and so they just weren't getting as much usage. This should be, I don't know. Detroit was bad, and I was against Carolina. I think Houston's a better team than Carolina, so they could get destroyed again, and then these guys are probably just going to get phased out. But they're both pretty good values. I would probably lean towards Kerryon because, he had 5 targets last week. That was pretty good for me. But, if Detroit gets out to an early lead, Adrian Peterson could be a fine option as well. I think you probably want to get, if you're playing a lot of tournament lineups, I think both of them are in play, and both are guys that I want to get some exposure to. Let's move on to the wide receivers. where I'm going to go over pretty much all of them. I just think they're kind of important to just go over all of them. I meant to take out Miles Boykin. I'm not interested in him. But the Baltimore wide receivers are Miles Boykin, Marquise Brown, and Willie Snead. They're going to be going up against Pittsburgh, who has allowed the 15th most points to opposing wide receivers this year. Pittsburgh has definitely been a team you attack from the air, not on the ground. They do still have tough overall matchups. I mean, Willie Snead in a slot against Cameron Sutton's really tough. Marquise Brown's going to get Hayden. Miles Boykin's going to get Nelson, probably switching on those two a lot. I mean, the one thing about Marquise Brown is he has a super high ADOT. I mean, I think he's got the highest of, Marvin Hall actually is a higher ADOT, but less usage. But, an average depth of target of 16 for Marquise Brown, that's really impressive. He does have 16 red zone targets and 7 end zone targets leading this team. But overall, the usage just hasn't been there. He's averaging 5.9 targets per game. And, I mean, for his price, it's just not something I'm really too excited to get to. Willie Snead's averaging 4 targets per game. Boykin only averaging 2.3. And in the last 3 weeks, Miles Boykin's been pretty much just phased out. So I'm pretty much not going to go to Miles Boykin at all. Willie Snead, though, I'm definitely interested in. I think I'm going to get some usage there because he is just cheap enough for me to want to get there. But overall, I mean, this Baltimore back or receiving core, I'm probably just not all that excited about. I'll probably get some Marquise Brown just because he has the upside and he can break the slate, but still probably not going to get there as much. We'll go to the Pittsburgh receivers where you got Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, and Juju. Juju's questionable, so we got to pay attention to that if he doesn't play. James Washington's probably going to slide in as a starter. But I'm interested in all 3 of these guys. I mean, the Baltimore Ravens secondary has been very good this year. They allowed only the 29th most points to opposing wide receivers so far, but on a small slate, I'm not too worried about that. Deontay Johnson's going to get a matchup with Marcus Peters, who's been probably the worst corner out of all of them. Claypool's going to get Jimmy Smith, and those two are probably going to switch. It's not just Deontay Johnson's going to get Marcus Peters. Like, Peters and Smith will be on both of those guys. But Marlon Humphrey in the slotting, Juju Smith-Schuster against Marlon Humphrey in the slot is probably the one spot I am going to avoid. I mean, that guy's just been insane this year. One of the best corners in the league, period. So I'm going to avoid that, especially when he's the one who's getting the least amount of usage right now. I mean, when we go look at overall usage, Claypool's averaging 6.5 targets per game. Deontay Johnson's averaging 11.1, and Juju Smith-Schuster's averaging 8.7. But for Chase Claypool in the last 4 weeks, he's seen 9, 13, 10, 8, and that compares to 8, 7, 13, and 5 for Juju. He's seeing more usage. Deontay Johnson definitely the clear number 1 receiver here. I mean, only one game where he was healthy did he not see, where he only saw 3 targets, which was against Baltimore earlier this year. But he played a whole game, but he was banged up. I do remember that. But yeah, I mean, 10, 13, 15, 10, 11, 16 targets last week. I mean, he had 28 points last week, and he had 16 targets and didn't even have a touchdown. So this guy is, I mean, he's probably one of my favorite plays on the slate. I know it's a tough matchup, but, I mean, just the usage is there. Ben Roethlisberger loves Deontay Johnson, so I'm definitely going to get some exposure there. I do want Chase Claypool also. He's got a ton of upside. That's why I said, if you want to run Ben Roethlisberger stacks, those are the guys I want to go to. Juju, I'm not as much of interest just because the matchup's brutal, but, I mean, you still want to get there. I think that's fine. Randall Cobb, Brandon Cooks, and Will Fuller are the wide receivers for the Houston Texans going against Detroit. Detroit's allowed the 16th most points to opposing wide receivers so far this year. They're not good. Their secondary is just not good. There's not even Jeff Okudah, who's been bad anyway, but Monty Oruwari, Desmond Trufant, they're not good cornerbacks, so not really too worried there. Randall Cobb has 7 red zone targets on the year, 4 end zone targets. Cooks has 13 red zone targets, 2 end zone targets. Fuller has 14 red zone targets and 5 end zone targets. When you look at overall usage, in the games all 3 of these guys played, Randall Cobb averaging 4.66 targets per game, and then Cooks and Fuller averaging about 7.5 targets per game. So they're both good plays. If you're playing Deshaun Watson stacks, I love going to all 3 of these guys. I mean, Randall Cobb probably be lower owned. He's really cheap. And Brandon Cooks is way too cheap. He's only $5,300, and for the usage he's getting, him and Fuller getting the same amount of usage, and he's $1,000 to $2,000 discount from Will Fuller. Yeah, give me all the Brandon Cooks. I mean, he's probably one of my favorite plays on the slate overall. So definitely interested there. If I'm playing Deshaun Watson stacks, I want some of all 3 of these guys. Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb are the wide receivers for the Dallas Cowboys going against the Washington football team. When you go look at the matchup, I mean, Washington's been good against receivers this year. They have a pretty good secondary, allowing only the 31st most points to opposing wide receivers, but I'm, again, just not really too focused on matchup as much this week. And I mean, we've seen them get exposed. They got exposed against Detroit 2 weeks ago. I mean, Marvin Hall and Marvin Jones just absolutely torched them. Now you get Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, and Michael Gallup, who are better than all 3 of those guys. Are probably better than those guys I just named. I'm not really too worried about it at all. When you look at the usage, Amari Cooper has 11 red zone targets and 3 end zone targets. Gallup has 15 end zone targets and 15 red zone targets and 4 end zone targets, and CeeDee Lamb has 14 red zone and 7 end zone targets. So all very good numbers there. When When you look at overall usage, Amari Cooper's averaging 9 targets per game, Gallup's averaging 6, and CeeDee Lamb's averaging 7.4. Michael Gallup's only $3,500. He's just way too cheap. I mean, yeah, I know he hasn't really been fantastic this year at all, but he is getting the usage like Dalton's throwing him the ball. 6 targets per game at $3,500 is just ridiculously too cheap. Definitely like Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb, going to play a good bit of them. I think they're just, they're going to usage. Definitely going to be interested. Terry McLaurin, Steven Sims on the other side of that game going against the Dallas Cowboys. These are the Washington football team wide receivers. Terry McLaurin's great. Like, he's just great. Like, just, yeah. I don't really have a lot else to say about him. That dude's just elite. He's a great wide receiver. And Steven Sims is pretty good as well. McLaurin has 14 red zone targets and 4 end zone targets. And I forgot to say, Dallas is allowing the second most points opposing wide receivers. I think they have the worst secondary in the league. Like, it's just terrible, man. Terry McLaurin averaging 9.3 targets per game, and I mean he's been a usage hog there. He's going to get Jordan Lewis and Chidobe Awuzie. There's no Trayvon Diggs. I kind of wish Trayvon Diggs was playing because he's terrible, but Terry McLaurin, man, I mean it's just kind of like you're just making a lineup. Yeah, just plug in Terry McLaurin. I don't care what your lineup is, what your stack is. Just plug in Terry McLaurin and plug in Zeke. I think those guys are kind of just plug and plays this week if you're only making a few lineups. They're just not expensive, and they get a ton of usage, and you have a ton of upside. So Terry McLaurin and Zeke are pretty much just my top guys of this week. Steven Sims, I'm also, kind of interested in. He's just dirt cheap on DraftKings. 3 targets per game isn't a ton, but we saw him get 6 in Week 10, and he's an awesome matchup in the slot against Jordan Lewis. So there's definitely some potential there that I want to get some thoughts on. Danny Amendola, Kenny Golladay, Marvin Hall, Marvin Jones Jr. are the wide receivers for Detroit, and I put Marvin Hall in here because Kenny Golladay might miss. He's questionable. He hasn't played the last few weeks. We'll see if he plays. I sort of feel like Golladay has a better chance than Swift this week for Detroit, but I really don't have that much of a read on that. But regardless, I think we gotta talk about Kenny Golladay. I have to talk about him even if he's not going to play. Houston's a terrible defense. They have a lot of 8th most points to opposing wide receivers this year. Marvin Jones has had a lot of usage in the red zone, 15 red zone targets and 7 end zone targets. But Kenny Golladay hasn't played every game this year. How many games has Kenny Golladay missed? He had the bye week. He missed week 1, week 2, week 3, week 10, or week 9, week 10, week 11. So he's missed 5 games this year. So of course Marvin Jones' numbers are going to be a little higher. He's averaging 6.4 targets per game in the games that he has played. Let me make sure that's right. Yeah, okay. He's averaging 6.4 targets per game. Marvin Hall, in the games where Kenny Golladay has been out right here, we've seen 5, 3, 3. But the thing with Marvin Hall, he's just kind of a deep threat. So he's just going to get the deep bombs. If I'm making Stafford stacks, I'm probably just going to, he's dirt cheap. If I'm going to go Marvin Jones, I'm just going to throw in Marvin Hall. He's just so cheap and he's easy to just plug and play. So I definitely like going there. Danny Amendola also seen the usage in the 2 games that he played with Al Golladay, 10 in week 9 and 3 in week 10. And then Marvin Jones seeing 4, 10, 6. He's just been consistent usage all year without Kenny Golladay. And we still haven't seen that Marvin Jones explosion game, and I don't think a lot of people would be that surprised if it came on Thanksgiving Day. So Marvin Jones Jr. definitely going to be interested in. Even if Kenny Golladay plays, Marvin Hall I'm not playing if Kenny Golladay plays. But if Kenny Golladay plays, I'm probably not going to get much Amendola, but still going to get Marvin Jones. If Galladay's out, all 3 of those of Amendola, Marvin Hall, and Marvin Jones are very interesting to me, and that bumps up T.J. Hockenson as well as we go into the tight ends. Where the first thing I'm going to talk about is Mark Andrews. I'm not really going to be too interested here. Pittsburgh's just been a team you just kind of can't play tight ends against this year. They've allowed they've been elite against tight ends, and they just have a great group of linebackers. The way they scheme up their defense it's to take out the tight end. So Mark Andrews is the most expensive tight end. Could be kind of an easy fade this week, honestly. When you go look at the red zone usage for Mark Andrews, is good. 17 red zone targets, 8 end zone targets, and overall usage is going to be averaging 6 per game. But I just hate the matchup. I know I said the 3-game slate, I'm not really too worried about matchup. Well, there's 2 matchups I'm worried about this week. You have Marlon Humphrey against Juju Smith-Schuster and the Steelers defense against tight ends. Those are the 2 matchups I'm just absolutely scared of this week. Everything else I'm not really too worried about, but those I don't want to look towards at all. Eric Ebron on the other side of the game going against Baltimore, and last year Baltimore was like this. You just didn't play tight ends against them because they were so good. But this year Baltimore's kind of been more vulnerable, 16th most points to opposing tight ends. Ebron has 13 red zone targets and 4 red zone targets. He's getting the usage where it matters, the higher upside usage. He's averaging 5.6 targets per game as well. Definitely getting a lot of usage in his passing game. I think he's a fine play. He's not expensive. He's cheap enough where you can just kind of fit him in any lineup. Getting a good bit of usage. He's probably not going to get a ton of ownership because people just don't really like Eric Ebron. I guarantee you Hawkinson's the highest owned tight end this week. Everyone loves that guy. But But Eric Ebron could end up being the highest scoring tight end of the week, and I don't think a lot of people will be surprised. Jordan Akins and Darren Fells are the tight ends for Houston. Detroit's allowing the 21st most points to opposing tight ends. When you go look at the usage, I mean, it's not going to be great for these guys. I mean, in games both played, Akins averaging 3.7 targets per game and Fells only averaging 2.1. Like, it's not great. But, I mean, you know, if you're playing a Houston stack, like, you can just throw in a cheap tight end. Like, I'm playing, like, yeah, I'm doing it. Deshaun Watson to Fuller. Honestly, Fuller and Brandon Cooks, and just, I need a tight end. No, let's just throw in Jordan Akins. Like, it's just not, it's not that hard to do. And it just adds to the game stack. Like, it's going to be correlation. So I'm probably only playing these guys in their stacks. I'm not going to probably play them by themselves. But yeah, I mean, if you just want to get there, I think that's fine. I think they're definitely okay options. They definitely have upside. Jordan Akins is a really good athlete too, so like he could break a long play. I like that guy's tight end. I think he's going to be a good tight end in this league. So definitely someone interested there. Dalton Schultz, I mean, he's been getting the volume going up against Washington. They've allowed 11th most points to opposing tight ends this year. He has 9 red zone targets, only 1 end zone target on the year, which isn't fantastic, but he's averaging 6.1 targets per game. So, I mean, he's just getting the usage, and I mean, he's averaging the most targets per game out of any tight end in the league or on the slate. So, definitely interested in Dalton Schultz. He's not expensive, so I definitely want to go there. Logan Thomas, I'm just going to keep going back to him. He's been getting the consistent usage, and now they play Dallas, allowing the 13th most points to opposing tight ends. They're just bad defense overall. 12 red zone targets on the year for Logan Thomas and 3 end zone targets. He's still super cheap on Draftkings. He's averaging 5.6 targets per game. So Logan Thomas is definitely in play for me again. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse every single week with this guy, and he just doesn't ever do anything. But eventually, he's going to get into the end zone. He's going to break the slate. So I'm still going to get a ton of Logan Thomas. And then T.J. Hockenson, I expect to be the highest owned tight end because everyone just loves to play this guy. Going against Houston, a horrible defense. He has 17 red zone targets and 9 end zone targets. That's the most on this slate. And he's averaging 6 targets per game. Like, yeah, I'm going to play T.J. Hockenson too. Like, he's just a great play. Easy plug and play for the Detroit stacks. I mean, seriously, if you want to do, let's say Galladay's in, Stafford, Galladay, Hockenson, great stack. If you want to do Stafford, Jones, and Galladay, that's a great stack. Now, you want to hear even another one? What if Galladay misses? This is a cheap stack that's easy to plug. Matthew Stafford, T.J. Hockenson, Marvin Hall, and Marvin Jones. And run it back with Fuller. And you just have a great game stack right there, and you can spend up at Zeke and Terry McLaurin as well. So I think that's really all I got to say in this video. Hope you guys really enjoyed it. Got a lot of good information. If you want to get more of my content, make sure to subscribe to my Patreon, where I'll be posting a big article for this slate, along with all my injury notes and news as we get to closer to lock where we find all that out. So be sure to check that out below. Want to follow me on social media, the links are below as well. And make sure to leave a like and subscribe on the video and the channel. Thanks, guys. Have a great weekend.